Thank you for being here at the start of the new year, Sunday number 1. You have perfect attendance at Pivot 613 for 2017. And Pivot 613 is coming up on 3 years, on being about 3 years old. It'll be almost exactly 3 years on Super Bowl Sunday since we had our first information meeting. And one of the things that we spent a lot of time thinking about was the whole issue of branding. In fact, we've thought about it consistently since we started. Let me explain what I mean. Something that companies and organizations are very concerned with is their brand. In fact, one of the ways in which companies try and turn their fortunes around when they're flailing or when things are not going as planned is they try to change their brand. They rebrand. Now, the word brand means many different things, but when companies and organizations use the word brand, what they're really referring to is the perception of the product or service. Now, here's the thing about branding. Most of the time when companies change their brand or go through the rebranding process, all that they do is they change the window dressing. They change their logos. They may even change their name. They may change the attire that the employees wear. They may even change the furniture. But the one thing that most companies neglect to change is the actual product. You see, the thing is that most companies don't think that the reason that they're failing is because of their product. They usually don't think that the product is a problem. Instead, they think that the real thing that they have to manage is the perception of their product. And if any of you have been in an organization that has rebranded or a company that has rebranded, you know how they spend hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars, trying to change the perception of the product rather than the product itself. Now, sometimes this is true. Sometimes the product or the service that is being offered by an organization is a great product. And the only thing that needs to change about it is the perception of the product. But most of the time, what is really happening is that a company is hoping that you are not smart enough to see through their smoke and mirrors. And sometimes this plays out to their advantage. But what happens most of the time is that people are smart. And they're smart enough to see through the fact that all that is being done is that you're changing the packaging, but the product is still the same crappy product. So why were we thinking of branding in the first place? Well, let's have an honest discussion about what's happening in the church in Canada at this moment. If you do not know it, most of you know this because I say it a lot here. If you do not know it, the church in Canada is going through hard times. Now, to be fair, there are some congregations that are not like our little conclave here. There are some congregations that are massive. And when you go to them or if you attend them, I've attended a congregation like that, everything seems fine and dandy. But we know the truth of the matter of what is happening outside our Christian conclaves. Because it is difficult to find in your neighborhood or at your workplace somebody that has a positive view of the church. So what has happened recently is that there's been a move towards planting new and trendy churches within most denominations in Canada. The hope is that by planting new churches, the church in Canada will be able to find its way back to relevance in the social and spiritual conversation of our country. Church planting is, in many respects, a rebranding exercise. Now, nobody would come out and say it this way, but in a very simplistic way, this is what tends to happen. I have to be brutally honest with you here because we are a church plant. We only started 3 years ago. And this is something that we could have so easily done. We could have simply taken an old tradition, update it with a trendy leader, slap some savvy marketing on it, and pass it off as something new and trendy. But for me and for some people around me, this was not enough. You see, each one of us had been a part of congregations of faith for enough time that we knew how easy it is for people to gather together and claim that they're following Christ, and then proceed to operate in ways that are anything but Christ-like. And the thing that we kept coming back to was that somehow the message of Christ, the message that Christ brought of unconditional love, astonishing grace, and unending mercy had been replaced with a warped message of love with preconditions, limited grace, and occasional drips of mercy. In the moments that it counted the most, the message of Christ was being choked out by our baser and broken instinct of fear. Our thinking was that you can rebrand all you want, but if you continue to allow the seeds of fear to germinate in your organization, you would end up recreating the communities that had the same problems as before. All you would have done was change the dressing, the window dressing on a crappy product. So we decided that Pivot 613 would be about something different. And when you first visit us, there are many things about this congregation that look exactly the same as they do at every other new church. There are also some aesthetic and procedural things that are different, but we never wanted to be about changing the packaging. We do not want Pivot 613 to simply be a rebranding experiment. We wanted it to be about a more fundamental change. We didn't want to simply say that we're Christians who follow Jesus' teaching. We wanted to actually be Christians who followed Jesus and actually took his teaching into practice. The thing that keeps people and organizations from actually following through with Jesus is fear. You can see it over and over again when churches are at crossroads over issues of race or economic status or even gender and sexual identity. The reaction is one of fear. And we felt that if we planted a congregation where fear exercised influence over our decision making or over the people that we tried to reach, all we would achieve in the end was a rebrand and not a completely different product. Now, in my opinion, the thing about Christianity, perhaps the thing that makes Jesus most compelling, is the whole concept of no fear. Through his teaching, through his example, eventually through his sacrifice, he breaks through every single thing that we can fear. His teaching, his example, his sacrifice show us that we no longer have to be slaves to fear. We no longer have to be caught in a decision-making loop of fear. We no longer have to ostracize and alienate people because of fear. We can step into a completely different paradigm in which fear is not the motivator or influencer. And the thing about Christ is that he actually shows the path away from fear. It's not what you would think. Most people think that the way to overcome fear is to be more courageous. Face your fears. Not Jesus. In him, the path to a life free of fear is a life of love. And if you think about it, you start to realize that he is right. Love is the only way that we're truly able to be fearless. Parents who love their kids are fearless. Parents, do you agree? Love makes us fearless in protecting our significant others. If you have a significant other, you know this. Love makes us fearless in standing up for our friends. Love motivates us to spend resources and creatively stretch them to save the lives of people we love. And love is actually the primary motivator of Christ and everything that he has done for us. A life free of fear is a life permeated with love. A paradigm in which fear has no power is a paradigm permeated, motivated by, and sustained by love. And to this day, this is still our desire. Pivot 613 has to be about something different. There has to be a paradigm shift. We can't go about the business of playing church and saying we are Christ followers when the message of Christ is not changing us. The paradigm shift is a shift towards love. That's all it is. Let's read a passage of scripture that gets read a lot at weddings. I've never understood why they read it at weddings, because it is about something so much more awesome than the simple love between a man and a woman. I think when Paul was writing this, I don't think he was thinking about that. But anyway, let's read it together. 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak with human eloquence and angelic ecstasy but don't love, I'm nothing but the creaking of a rusty gate. If I speak with God's power, revealing all his mysteries and making everything plain as day, and if I have faith that says to a mountain, jump, and it jumps, but I don't love, I am nothing. If I give everything I own to the poor and even go to the stake to be burned as a martyr, but I don't love, I've gotten nowhere. So no matter what I say, what I believe in, what I do, I am bankrupt without love. Love never gives up. Love cares more for others than for self. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. Love doesn't strut. Love doesn't have a swelled head, doesn't force itself on others, isn't always me first, doesn't fly off the handle, doesn't keep score of the sins of others, doesn't revel when others grovel, takes pleasure in the flowering of truth, puts up with anything, trusts God always, always looks for the best, never looks back but keeps going to the end. Love never dies. Inspired speech will be over someday. Praying in tongues will end. Understanding will reach its limit. We only know a portion of the truth, and what we say about God is always incomplete. But when the complete arrives, our incompletes will be canceled. When I was an infant at my mother's breast, I gurgled and cooed like any infant. When I grew up, I left those infant ways for good. We don't see things clearly. We're squinting in a fog, peering through a mist, but it won't be long before the weather clears and the sun shines bright. We'll see it all then, see it as clearly as God sees us, knowing him directly just as he knows us. But for right now, until that completeness, we have 3 things to do to lead us towards that consummation. Trust steadily in God, hope unswervingly, love extravagantly. And the best of these 3 is love. What Paul encapsulates so beautifully in this passage is something that we will always be about here at Pivot 613. A new world is literally created for you through love. A completely different paradigm is unlocked through love. Now, in our popular culture, the word love is reduced to a mushy emotion between 2 people that are still getting to know each other. But that's not love, that's infatuation. Love is much bigger, isn't it? It is so much stronger. As he writes here, it's more than eloquence or ecstasy. It is stronger than faith that can move mountains and tougher than the sacrifice of humanitarian work or martyrdom. Love will outlive speech and the tongues of men and angels. And it is this kind of love, this transformative, stronger than death kind of love, that is the true paradigm shift that I'm trying to illuminate this afternoon. Now, I have a tendency to speak a lot about what it means for us as a congregation and then leave you with a personal application, because I want you to ponder what it means for you. Also, I think you're smart enough to kind of figure these things out. But today, I'm going to get a little bit personal. I don't know if you watched last weekend's video message. We didn't have a service here, so I put out a video message. And if you did, one of the things that you will have heard me speak about is that we need to change the space in which we make lasting life decisions. Most of us, the way that we make resolutions or lasting life decisions is we make them in a place of regret. We build up enough regret over the failings of our past, and then we try to use it as the launch pad for the change we want to see in our lives. We try to change our lives by focusing on our mistakes, but this almost never works. And so my proposal was that we consider making life change from a completely different space. You see, we will never be able to create a congregation of love first if we do not become a people who choose love first. And if you boil any life change that we want to make down to its basic elements, you will find that for most of us, when we're trying to make life change, we just want to persevere more. We want to care more for others. We want to be more content. We want to be less vain. We want to be more compassionate, more enlightened, and have more self-control. You cannot actualize this version of yourself if you make decisions from a place of regret or if you are trapped by fear. You cannot find this version of yourself, this better version of yourself, if your starting point is regret or failure. This is what the passage we just read says. Love never gives up. What is that? That is perseverance. Love cares more for others. That is compassion. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. That is contentment. Love doesn't strut, doesn't have a swelled head, doesn't force itself on others, isn't always me first, doesn't always fly off the handle. That's vanity, and love takes that away from us. Love doesn't keep the score of sins of others. It doesn't revel when others grovel. Takes pleasure in the flowering of truth. Puts up with anything. Trusts God always. Enlightenment, you see, always looks for the best, never looks back, but keeps going to the end. I don't know a person who wouldn't like this as a checklist for their life. I don't know of a single person that has their head screwed on right that would not like to embody these ideals. I don't know of a person who wouldn't like to break out of the paradigm of their life and find a new paradigm in which these ideals are true for them. And the path to this paradigm, beautifully, as Christ puts it before us, is love. The path to your best self is love. But make no mistake about it. The kind of love that casts out all fear is not cheap. It's a different kind of love. It's an expensive love. We get glimpses of it in our love for one another, but they are only poor reflections of something greater, Christ's love for mankind. And when we, by faith, allow it to permeate us and change us, our lives take on a whole new dimension. Our eloquence, our faith, our acts of mercy do not ring hollow, but they become filled with purpose and meaning. And for this little congregation that we're in the process of building, we're not content to simply play church or rebrand church. We want to change the product. We want to find our path to a community that does not simply speak eloquently or have displays of faith that ring hollow because fear has permeated our community. We want the foundation of what we do to be love first. As individuals, as a community, we can find a path to an incredibly different kind of life through love. Let's read one more scripture. 1 John 4. God is love. When we take up permanent residence in a life of love, we live in God and God lives in us. This way, love has the run of the house, becomes at home and mature in us so that we're free of worry on Judgment Day. Our standing in the world is identical with Christ. There is no room in love for fear. Well-formed love banishes fear. Since fear is crippling, a fearful life, fear of death, fear of judgment, is one not yet fully formed in love. We, though, are going to love. Love and be loved. First we were loved, now we love. He loved us first. If anyone boasts, I love God, and goes right on hating his brother or sister, thinking nothing of it, he is a liar. If he won't love the person he can see, how can he love God that he can't see? The command we have from Christ is blunt. Loving God includes loving people. You've got to love both. I hope that each one of you finds a path to a new paradigm this year, a paradigm of love. I hope that you find Christ's love. I hope that you allow it to permeate your life and banish fear and unlock something in you that you could have never known without it. God, I pray that you take these thoughts and and crystallize them and give them legs outside of this room and outside of this space. Let them stay with us and change us this year. We need to step into a new paradigm, and you can take us there. Amen.